My name is Rachel Hayes, and on the evening of my sister's wedding, I stood at the edge of a glittering ballroom in a dress I had bought off a rack, a glass of sparkling water in my hand because champagne on an empty stomach would only make me tired. The lights from the chandeliers spilled across the polished floor, and I was thinking about how happy Lily looked when it happened. He walked right past me. Richard Mercer, father of the groom, the man who ran a company large enough to own half of downtown Charlotte, brushed by me without a nod, without a glance, as if my presence didn't register. There was a chill in that kind of dismissal, a learned thing, the kind of casual superiority that never has to raise its voice. I stood very still and let it slide off me. The expensive cologne, the cut of his suit, the assumption written across his posture that he knew the value of everyone in the room. He didn't know me. That much was obvious. I watched him work the room, laughing with partners, clasping hands, measuring people in seconds. To him, I was nothing more than a shadow of my sister, a single plus one who belonged to no one. I could feel it in the way he had looked through me earlier when we were introduced. The faint hesitation, as if wondering why someone like Lily would even bother to mention an older sister whose name never appeared in the social pages. What he could not see was everything that had come before this night. The years between us, the weight I had carried for her so she could stand here in silk and flowers. That, though, was fine. I had grown used to the way powerful men underestimate women who keep their heads down. And maybe, in another life, I would have cared more about that slight. But tonight, I let the insult sit there like a stone on the bottom of a deep lake. Because I knew something he did not, and the knowledge was enough to keep my breathing slow and my expression calm while he assumed I was nobody. The string quartet finished a song. A small burst of applause rose from the tables, and as the master of ceremonies stepped toward the microphone, someone from the catering staff leaned in close to whisper my name. "You're up next," she said, and it took a second for the words to land. There had been no plan for me to speak. I glanced toward the stage, then back to Lily, radiant and glowing, and understood. Maybe the night had decided it was time. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, set my glass aside, and began to make my way forward, heels steady on the polished floor. Somewhere behind me, Richard Mercer was still talking, still certain of the shape of the world. He hadn't looked at me yet. He would. I was 22 the day everything changed. One phone call in the middle of the semester. One voice on the other end telling me there had been an accident, and before the sun went down, I was driving home with my hands shaking on the wheel. By the time I got there, both of my parents were gone, and the little house in North Carolina that had always been noisy with their voices suddenly felt like a stranger's place. Lily was 17, 1 week away from graduation, and I still remember the look on her face when I walked through the door. She didn't even cry at first. She just stared at me like maybe if she held perfectly still, the world would start making sense again. It didn't. The funeral came and went like a blur, and when it was over, the reality settled in. There was no one else. No uncles or grandparents to step in. No secret trust fund. Just the two of us and a mountain of debt my parents had tried to shield us from. Those months after the funeral were brutal. We lost the house almost immediately, and with it went everything that had once felt stable. Creditors called, letters came, and I realized quickly that whatever life I thought I was going to have was gone. I pulled Lily out of the wreckage of that house and into a tiny apartment I could barely afford on my student stipend. During the day, I went to class and tried to focus through the fog of grief. At night, I worked, first at a coffee shop, then as a delivery driver, then cleaning offices on weekends. Anything that paid just enough to keep a roof over us and food on the table. Some nights I would come home and find her curled up on the couch doing her homework in my hoodie because she couldn't bring herself to sit alone in the bedroom. I never told her that I skipped meals so she could have seconds, that the bags under my eyes weren't just from crying. I let her believe there was a plan, when in truth I was making it up hour by hour, willing myself to hold everything together long enough to get her to the other side of high school. College for her was the only goal I clung to, a lighthouse in the storm. Every shift, every class, I forced myself to sit through exhausted and numb. Every canceled date and friendship that faded away. It all became a trade I was willing to make if it meant Lily could graduate, could have a shot at a life not defined by what we had lost. By the time I earned my own degree, I had almost nothing left of myself. I was broke, worn thin, older than my years, but I had kept us afloat. I had watched her cross the stage in a borrowed gown, smiling for the first time in months. And in that moment, I knew it had all been worth it. That promise I made to her, to be enough when there was no one else, became the thing that kept me moving forward long after my own strength should have run out. After graduation, there was no celebration, no road trip with friends, no chance to pause and breathe. I packed my degree into a folder and walked straight into a job that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. A low-level position in a back office where no one remembered my name by the end of the week. Every morning I sat at a cubicle with beige walls and a secondhand computer, sorting through data sheets and answering emails while the hum of fluorescent lights pressed down on me. But at night, when the office emptied and the city went quiet, I opened my laptop and taught myself everything I couldn't afford to learn in a classroom. Marketing software, code basics, cloud tools, the anatomy of how systems work. I wasn't chasing a dream. I was trying to make sure that what had happened to us never had to happen again. Lily started community college, and I paid every bill I could, cooking dinner on an old stove and saving the leftovers for tomorrow because that's what survival looked like then. It was 2 years of that grind before the chance came. A friend from university, Noah Brooks, reached out late one evening with an idea and a question. Would I join him and another classmate in building a small platform they believed could change the way small businesses handled logistics? I laughed at first, told him I didn't have the time or the money to gamble on something so uncertain, but his conviction wore me down. Something inside me wanted to feel alive again. So I said yes. From that moment, my life split into 2 halves. By day, I worked the same office job, and by night, I became part of a fledgling company that had nothing but a borrowed laptop, endless coffee, and stubbornness. We built our first tools in diners and borrowed co-working spaces. We failed more times than I can count. Months went by when there was no sign that any of it would work, when the idea of giving up felt like the most rational option in the world. But every time I came close to quitting, I saw Lily at the kitchen table, studying late, and I remembered why I couldn't stop. The breakthrough came quietly, not with fireworks, but with a single client who believed in what we had built. That client told another, and suddenly there were meetings on the calendar, money in the account, articles online that mentioned us by name. Noah became the face of the company, the one who smiled on panels and in interviews, while I stayed in the background where I preferred to be. I wasn't in it for the attention. I was in it for the stability it could give us, for the chance to put an end to the years when everything felt like it could collapse at any moment. And slowly, that stability came. Lily transferred to a state university. We had a safe apartment, health insurance, a savings account. To the world, I might have still been invisible. But to her, I was the person who had made sure we survived long enough to finally start living. It was a Wednesday evening when Lily called me, her voice trembling with something I couldn't place at first. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by half-finished reports, eating leftover pasta straight out of the container. When she said it, she was getting married. At first, I thought I'd misheard her, but she repeated it, laughing nervously in the way she always did when something mattered to her. She told me his name was Evan, that they had been dating seriously for a while, and she had kept it from me because she wasn't sure how to bring it up. I put the container down, stunned, and asked if she was happy. She said she was more than happy. She was certain. When she asked if I would meet him that weekend, I said yes. I owed her that much. And so, 2 days later, Evan Mercer stood at my door holding flowers and a bottle of wine, trying so hard to make a good impression. He was polite, warm, and there was an ease in the way he looked at her that made me want to like him immediately. We talked through dinner, the small things first, until finally the conversation circled to family. Mercer, I said, repeating his last name, feeling a cold thread run down my spine. Any chance you're related to Richard Mercer? The brief pause before his answer was all I needed. He's my father, Evan said carefully, and suddenly everything inside me shifted. Richard Mercer, the same man whose firm had been circling around our platform for over a year, sending proposals and offers as if the company I helped build was a thing he could simply buy and own. The same man whose name filled the business pages for his aggressive acquisitions, the kind that left no room for partnership, only control. And now he was the father of the man who wanted to marry my sister. I sat there with my glass of water and forced my face to remain neutral. I did not bring up the company, not once. This was Lily's life, not mine, and she deserved to have it unshadowed by my battles. That night after Evan left, Lily asked me quietly if I was all right. I told her I was. I told her if she was sure, I was in her corner, and I meant it. So when the formal dinner came a few weeks later, a gathering at a country club where the Mercers held court at a long table with white linen and polished silver, I walked in determined to be there only as a sister. Richard Mercer greeted me with a handshake so limp it felt more like a dismissal than a gesture. His eyes flicked over my dress, my shoes, weighing and discarding me all in one glance. "You're her sister," he said, as if that explained everything, and then he turned his attention to someone else. Later, when he asked what I did for a living, I said simply that I worked in corporate operations, true enough without offering anything more. His interest vanished instantly. That disinterest, that quiet assumption that I was of no consequence, pressed around me like a fog. I let it sit. I smiled politely, kept my voice calm, and gave him nothing in return. For Lily's sake, I swallowed every word I might have said. I watched them all toast the engagement, and behind my stillness, I reminded myself that there would come a day when he would know exactly who I was. But that day was not today. On the day of the wedding, I had promised myself I would stay out of the way. This was Lily's day, not mine, and I was content to watch from the quiet edges of the ballroom, a guest in a dress I'd chosen to disappear into the background. I watched her walk down the aisle with a smile so wide it made me forget everything that had ever hurt us, and I thought that maybe all the nights of exhaustion and worry had led to this. After the ceremony came the reception, a swirl of laughter and toasts and clinking glasses. I stayed at my table, speaking only when spoken to, until a hand touched my shoulder. One of the catering staff leaned down and whispered that I was next. "Next for what?" I asked, startled, but the answer came as they pointed toward the stage where a microphone stood waiting. I had not planned on speaking, but something in Lily's face when she saw me stand told me she had hoped for this moment. So I took a slow breath, smoothed the skirt of my dress, and walked toward the front of the room with the eyes of strangers following me. The room grew quieter as I turned to face them. My voice was steady, softer than I felt. I told them my name and that I was Lily's older sister. But more than that, I was the person who had been there when the world fell apart. I spoke of how, after our parents died, we had been left with nothing but each other. How I was 22 and she was 17, and there was no one else to catch us when we fell. I told them about the nights when I came home from class too tired to speak, the jobs I took, the friends I lost, the ways I tried to be both a sister and a parent all at once. My voice trembled only once when I said that Lily never complained, that she carried her share of the weight and still managed to grow into the bright, fearless woman sitting in front of me. A hush settled over the tables. I could feel it even from the stage. Glasses lowered, chairs stilled, the entire room leaning forward to listen. And then, almost as an afterthought, I told them that somewhere in the middle of all that survival, I had co-founded a small tech company with 2 friends, that we built it from nothing, in borrowed spaces, with nothing but stubbornness and a hope that things could be better. I didn't go into details. I didn't need to. A few people in the crowd recognized the name when I mentioned it, their eyes widening just slightly. I finished by turning to Lily and Evan, telling them that love is the thing that carries you through the fire, and that I was proud, so proud, to watch them choose each other. There was no triumph in my voice, no bitterness, only gratitude that we had made it this far. And as I stepped down from the stage, I saw Richard Mercer's face for the first time break, the certainty replaced by something else entirely, the understanding of who he had so carelessly dismissed. When I stepped down from the stage, the room erupted in polite applause, but I barely heard it. I was moving back toward my table, my focus already on Lily's tearful, radiant smile, when a shadow fell across my path. Richard Mercer was standing there, hand extended, his expression far less certain than it had been an hour ago. "Rachel, wasn't it?" he said, his voice even but softer than before. I took his hand out of courtesy, not eagerness. He thanked me for the speech, told me that what I had built was impressive, that I should have said something sooner. I met his eyes and said, very quietly, that I wanted him to see me first without any titles, without any hint of what I did, because that was who I really am. He held my gaze for a long moment, searching for a response, but none came. I let go of his hand and left him standing there among the clinking glasses and murmurs of guests who had witnessed the shift in tone. The rest of the evening passed in a way that felt lighter, as if a tension I had been holding in my chest for years had finally loosened. Richard kept his distance after that, civil but quieter, no longer dismissive. I sat with Noah for a while, and we laughed about how strange life could be, how it had brought me from long nights with a second-hand laptop to this glittering room. Later, I danced with Lily, her veil brushing against my arm, and in that circle of music and lights, I thought about everything we had been through. There were moments when I had believed we would never escape the gravity of loss, that no amount of effort would be enough to pull us into a life where she could stand in a white dress with joy written across her face. But we had made it here, together. That knowledge was worth more than anything else. As the night came to a close and guests began to drift toward the doors, I stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the city lights stretching in every direction. For years I had thought that success meant proving myself to people who didn't believe I was enough. Tonight reminded me that it never had. True strength had been forged in the quiet, in the decisions no one saw, in the promise I made to protect Lily when there was no one else left. Titles, companies, and recognition. They are only shadows. What matters is who stands beside you when the room is empty and the applause has faded. I walked back to my table, my heels silent on the floor, and saw Lily laughing with Evan, free in a way I had always wanted her to be. That, I realized, was all I had ever wanted. Not for anyone to see me, but for her to be safe enough to be happy. Everything else was just noise. We never sold the company to Richard Mercer. Not out of spite and not because of what happened at that dinner table, but because the offers were built on the assumption that everything has a price, that people only matter once their resume is read aloud. I learned a long time ago that kind of respect comes too late to be worth anything. Noah and I kept our company independent and grew it on our own terms. And yes, Mercer Enterprises still licenses our platform. His employees file tickets into the same queue as everyone else, and we answer them politely, professionally, never personally. Evan never brings it up, and I am grateful for that. He loves Lily. He sees her for who she is, and that is all I ever wanted. Over time, trust has grown between us, the kind that isn't built on names or wealth, but on the quiet knowledge that he will protect her when I no longer need to. Lily has a life now that feels safe, full, and bright. She teaches, gardens, fills her weekends with things that make her smile. A real smile that used to be so rare, that more than anything, has been the return on every sleepless night. People still underestimate me, and that's fine. I have learned that the ones who look through you when you are silent will scramble to respect you when someone finally names your accomplishments. But by then, their respect means nothing. Real strength is choosing who you are when no one is watching. It isn't about being loud or visible. It's about standing steady until the ones you love are free. I never needed the spotlight. I only needed Lily to be all right. Now she is. That is more than enough.